All right, hello everybody, and welcome to our May AMA. This is, let's see, our second one of the year, third one of the year. We try to do this every 4 to 6 weeks, and figured it was time to do a new one. So we've got a nice, robust group of people here this week for this one. A couple things to get to off the top, excuse me, before we start. Um, we don't have any huge earth-breaking Apple-style just one more thing announcements today. So if you are waiting through the whole thing with bated breath, I don't want you to be disappointed at the end when we don't do that. I want to kind of set that expectation now. When we have really big earth-shattering announcements, that's when we do the live stream with the Q&A and the save the date kind of stuff. So this isn't one of those. This is just our regular scheduled AMA. We do have some fun things to share you probably haven't heard about before, but no huge announcements. On that note, if you're going to ask us about NFTs, we're not going to go into that with you guys about this one. There is a whole plan on that we've kind of teased out before. There is stuff about that coming soon, and I am not adding TM to that, so read into that what you will. And beyond that, also there's the issues we get asked a lot about exchanges. We are hard at work on those, like we've always been. Cool stuff is in the works there. When things are ready to share about new exchanges, new stuff, that news will break as it happens. We're not going to hold it for stuff like this as a surprise. So if you have questions about that, it's the same status quo it's always been. We're working really hard on exchange stuff. When things are ready, they get shared. Not a lot has new to share on that front. And lastly, we've had a lot of questions leading up to the AMA. People asking us, I want to talk to you about IPOs. We're not going to talk a lot about that. We can't talk a lot about that. We keep telling you guys part of that process is you can't talk about it. And in fact, I'll even give a 2 Chia bounty to someone who makes a really great parody song and records it for us of We Don't Talk About Bruno to the subject of We Don't Talk About the IPO. um, with that out of the way, I'll let everyone here kind of say hello and good morning and reintroduce themselves for those who don't know them.
Well, good morning, Storage JM here. John Michael Hands, I'm our VP of Storage. Just got back from Vegas, the Dell Tech World, so I'm coming to life here.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Hainsworth. I'm our VP of Product here at Chia, and I'll pass it off to Earle.
Hey everyone, I'm Earle. This is actually my first AMA. I'm one of the engineering managers here at Chia. I've been at Chia for about a year, and yeah, excited to answer some questions.
Hi, and I'm Justin. I do IPS DevOps here at Chia. I'm sure people know who I am. Nice to see you all again.
And I'm Gene. I'm the CEO and president and the Soon King.
And I just noticed, folks, the YouTube stream, apparently the video has frozen. We tried a new thing this time to do it better than the past times, and instead apparently it has broken out of the gate because that's the kind of luck I have. So give me one quick second here. I'm going to restart that stream in an attempt to get it to play happy. So we get a lot of complaints about audio volume when we do Zoom and on YouTube. And what I have learned is that the problem is that my mic input is different between Zoom and YouTube stream because of the way we capture them. So we've tried a whole new way to do it so that people wouldn't have issues with the audio balance between me and everyone else on Zoom going forward. And I tested it 3 or 4 times and it worked out great. And so we went this new process this time, and now it seems it's just broadcasting solid video. Apparently, OS X doesn't like capturing a browser window on this particular computer. And I don't know why it's happening on this one right now. I'm very sorry, folks.
So Jay, I'll take the master ceremonies from you for right now.
Please do. I was about to say, if you would take that over while I get this set up, yeah.
So question on one of the other AMAs, Bram or someone talked about potentially moving away from SQLite as our database store. So Earle, would you like to talk about how we think about our databases?
Yeah, so I think it's an evaluation phase that's ongoing, right? And it's a fairly longer term poll, right? It's not something that's going to happen very eminently, but the main things we're interested in is we're always interested in improving performance, and we find a lot of the things SQLite in terms of performance, especially when you're not actually querying the database, but you're just like syncing, which is just adding stuff to the blockchain, could be done a lot faster if you just had like flat files or something like that, or other things we would evaluate, like some of the other DBs that the other chains use. So primarily we're interested in anything that's going to improve performance, and also the other issue is the SQLite database, as actually JM's done a lot of great videos on it. It has a lot of high IOP demand to just sync a node, and if we could reduce that, I think it would just be better, right? It would just be great if anything we could do to try to reduce the load, and SQL's not known for being light on IOPS. So those are the two things we'd really like to do, just so that syncing is lower IO on syncing, we get better performance, and we can just overall just improve the behavior of the blockchain when you're running it. But like I said, it's a long-term project. Reducing the space is always something we're always looking for too, but I think it's a long-term project for the SQLite database.
Yeah, I kind of laughed.
I would expect it to be SQLite for a while yet.
Yeah, and I laughed. Somebody filed a bug on GitHub about the database actually performing writes, and that's what databases do. They write the entries into the database. We've profiled it. We understand it. We know how much data is being written on higher transaction days for slower transaction days, and we can estimate how big with the current technology the database will grow in a few years, and we've forecasted that out. So right now it's not anything alarming, but the minimum requirement for a full node is a cheap SSD, whether that be a SATA SSD, NVMe SSD, or USB SSD. Not supporting SD cards, not supporting hard drives officially.
Yeah, I think this is a good example of something that's come up before, is that we end up like the node just writes a ton to the DB, and a lot of it's just the way SQL works. It's not like, I don't think necessarily it's anything that we're doing strangely in our code or anything like that. It's well within what an SSD can handle, right? But it still does a lot, and reducing that would also be a good goal.
All right, I'll take back over now. Got everything fixed. It turns out you just can't minimize a browser window on OS X when it's streaming video. It just freezes it. So lesson learned. Gene, got one for you. Got a shotgun question out of the gate here that covers a variety of topics, several of which we've already kind of touched on. But they ask, any news in the following: Atari, asteroids, cats, AMMs, NFTs? Any plans of XCH listed on exchanges by the end of the year? And on Keybase, Gene recently stated, there are things in the pipeline which are imminent, which will increase XCH price. So which parts of those do you want to touch on?
I'll just take them all.
Right.
The answer is yes, but no. The reality is next week is going to be a busy week. We invite you all to stay tuned. The way I describe where we're at right now to investors and other people that I talk to, partners, is that this is a project that's kind of a coiled spring, and it's not clear exactly which of the 9 major things we're going to do over the next 6 months is going to be the thing that really moves it out. We think that one of the biggest issues is quite simply that it's very thinly traded and not available to, or easy to get in the US. Obviously, as we said at the top of the stream, we're working actively on solving that problem. Some updates, Atari is obviously the climate warehouse and data layer. Right now, it looks like Singapore is going to become the host nation of the climate warehouse, though that is not complete. The kind of targeted go live is Q4-ish. And again, that's kind of an ongoing conversation between the various nations and us kind of tracking along with that. The one thing I can tell you is that the number of nations and voluntary registries that have been involved with testing the climate warehouse has been about 2x what was expected. Apparently, word got out that it was cool and it worked, and so a lot of people have been wanting to try it out. There is a lot more test data in the public node if you ever want to take a look at that as well. And then, we still have not talked about what Project Asteroids is. It is going to get complete, but when you're working with very, very large entities, sometimes their internal red tape takes a little while. And then beyond that, as I said, tune in next week for a whole host of news. There's a bunch of things that we were hoping to get out in the last couple weeks that have all ended up landing on next week and are now actually complete, and so we're excited about that.
Alrighty. Let's see here. Paul, got one for you here. Do we have any new news we can share on Wrapped ETH or Bitcoin?
Yeah, so there's a couple of fronts. One is our friends at Stably continue to work to supporting Wrapped ETH and Wrapped Bitcoin. They've got some diligence still with Prime Trust to make that happen. And the second piece is that we are actively in R&D mode around bringing bridges to Chia, with primary use cases being on the ETH side of things. You could send ETH to the bridge and get wrapped ETH on the Chia side as a Chia asset token. There are several other assets that matter in that department too, including Bitcoin. So that is an active and ongoing R&D project for us at the moment. And as we get closer to release, we'll have more updates for the community.
All right, thank you. Gene, got another one for you. A little more esoteric, like business kind of question. Without going too much into the specific details, is Chia Network, the company, still on the same timeline that we were on last year after our last capital raise? Additionally, given the monthly cash burn is potentially higher than first thought due to numerous employees hired, do we anticipate doing another funding round?
So I would point out, without getting into too much details, that in fact this model was built and we are actually slightly behind our model from a cash spend perspective. So we very much knew that we had to grow the company very drastically, starting with 5.3. Because remember, we've raised publicly 61 million. If you read the white paper, there's even more than that was raised in the May-ish last year timeframe. But we remain on plan. If it's at a little under, which has been great because it allows us to do certain things that are more one-off. And we remain on a accelerated timeline to go public, as we've talked about, and we expect that there will be a financing component of that.
Cool. Earle, do we have any further database compaction stuff in the works?
You're muted, Earle.
You are, yeah.
Thanks, people. I wouldn't expect anything as drastic as what happened with V2, which was pretty close to a 50% reduction. I do think there probably will be some further improvements in there. One of the things we did with V2 is we literally just compressed the blocks, right, with compression. So one thing we talk about is like, well, we could compress more, like with using more options to the compressor algorithm, which it's a trade-off between space and time and doing that. But just realized that was kind of an amusing non sequitur. But yeah, so I think there probably will be some improvements, but I wouldn't expect anything substantial like what would happen with V2, where it was a pretty big reduction. So I think you should probably expect the current size of V2 going forward as using that as your growth estimates. But I think there is still room for improvement. It'll be marginal.
Yeah, and as Earle mentioned, their Z standard actually has different compression ratio levels to trade off between CPU input and compression. Now, I think the database writes are spread out long enough where you can probably get on most general people's farming systems another 20-30%, but we didn't want to set the default too high and mess up people's systems. So hopefully there's more tunable settings that we'll have shortly to have some different size databases depending on if you feel comfortable messing with some knobs in the config.
And we're able to upstream a Z standard set of wheels now so that you can all use this everywhere.
Oh yeah, that was nice.
Alrighty. JM, do we have any plans to publish more clear carbon energy, drive life statistics, analysis, that kind of stuff, both to help counter FUD in general and kind of also in light of that ClimaDAO article that came out recently?
Yeah, so this is part of my day job, and we actually spend a tremendous amount of time looking at sustainability from the energy perspective, carbon impact. I work quite frequently with, of course, on the Circular Drive Initiative, and then with our storage vendors on life cycle assessments for the products. So when I originally wrote Chia Power, which actually is 13, 14 months old now, I based it on the best-in-class Bitcoin analysis for energy consumptions. That was the Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Study and Digiconomist. And we've actually been working with some of those folks on some of the new methodologies that are best in practice for actually looking at the total energy carbon impact for all kinds of blockchains. Storage devices happen to be very unique now that even since I've released that, now Seagate has full lifecycle assessments for all the products that they have now listed on their webpage. Seagate also reports scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. So we can actually really look at the actual impact at the drive level and estimate, much better than we could a year ago. So I'm actually working on that right now, is how do we summarize all that into something that makes sense? Obviously, the climate thing was really frustrating for all of us, and the community did a good job of like responding to the glaring points in the article that were just absolutely ridiculous, like confusing plotting and farming and assuming the life cycle of a drive in Chia farming is, in the weeks, which is very ridiculous. Of course, anybody who knows and does Chia farming knows that you can use drives in media quality that's actually, much lower quality than you would for just storing actual user data. So yeah, that we want to be able to publish stuff instead of just responding piece by piece to these silly articles that have misunderstood references and are citing these like really stupid old FUD articles that came out like right after we launched. So we are working on obviously a much more robust sustainability strategy that includes reporting all that. So
one of my favorite things about that is that after all of that work and all of that wrong, it actually shows that our per node energy efficiency is better than them.
Real quick before I get to the next question, I just want to remind folks, if you have a question to ask, please use the Q&A function inside the Zoom webinar to put it into the queue. That is the most efficient and best way to get a question in front of us. If you put the question in the YouTube chat, we do appreciate folks watching on YouTube live stream, but really we cross stream to YouTube 1, so there's an archive there for folks to watch after the fact at their leisure. And 2, just to get a wider base of folks who can't or are unable to use Zoom for whatever reason. But ultimately, the best way to get a question to us is through the Q&A thing in Zoom. If you're putting them in Keybase or YouTube, I might not see them. If we kind of get a lull in questions, I might have time to go hunt for those. But really, the Q&A thing in Zoom is the best way to get questions to us. With that said, Gene, does Singapore becoming the host nation have any implications on our other Costa Rican participation?
Not at all. It's two different things. So what we're doing with Costa Rica is making it so they can more easily interact with the Climate Warehouse for their own national registry and their voluntary registries that they work with. The host nation concept here is kind of weird because, of course, there's no real host to a public blockchain. It's really more who's going to long-term be the day-to-day operator to get changes and the person who gets the first phone call or email for support from the other nations and the other voluntary registries. Obviously, we expect that the second layer of support is likely to be us. So, it's that's how that works. We're going to see multiple nations need to do things like what is already happening with Costa Rica. And Costa Rica's software is seen as kind of a de facto standard that other people use as well. So that's partially why we're working with Costa Rica on that specific project.
Cool, thank you. Paul, I have a question about chips. Chip 02, do we have an idea of when that will be ready to go? And I think that might be a good opportunity to talk about the chip process as well, because I think the question kind of implies maybe there's not some perfect clarity in how the chip process works.
Yeah, I think there's also a question about other chips that are in the hopper. So chip 2 is about a DApp protocol between wallets and dApps, and is not authored by Chia. It's authored by a community member, which is fantastic, exactly what we're looking for. And so that is a work in progress. We're providing feedback. Cameron Cooper, our head of developer product, has been actively engaged with that team. But the process for that is still kind of TBD because the team that's writing the chip is also still contributing to it. As regards to other chips that are in the hopper, we are working on some now, and you'll see news on these shortly. We do have a chip for NFTs. You all heard that we're working on NFTs, and as a new standard, it's part of the chip process. We also have a chip for DIDs, which is decentralized identifiers. We believe that DIDs are a really important building block here at Chia. So we will have a standard in a chip to share with you all really soon. And we do have some other chips in the hopper. I think I'll hold off on talking about some of those for another discussion though.
All right, thank you. Gene, has Chia Network thought about the impact of the upcoming predicted global recession and whether it might affect targeting financial institutions as partners in the short term?
Yeah, so look, our macro view is important just as we kind of navigate through. My current macro view is that inflation is going to be a bit of a pain in the derriere through the end of the calendar year, but I don't actually think we'll see a recession during the calendar year. I think the more risk is, sometime Q2-ish next year, calendar-wise. However, even in a recession, the financial institutions, this is so critical to their future that the commercial banks and the financial institutions, I don't think this is going to have any impact on, their adoption cycles. I don't foresee a 2008 style crisis in any way. I think we're going to see something more like, well, we haven't seen a lot of these gentler recessions in a long, long time because usually something systemic bakes off. But nonetheless, it's all about getting inflation back under control. Ultimately, that should be good for crypto, but we're still all high risk assets from most investors' point of view. So anyway, I just, the core part of the question, is that going to change our adoption rollout? I don't think so. But obviously we have to be careful to make sure that we're, keeping our costs in line and being efficient with the capital that we do have as we, kind of navigate the markets. And there's a bunch of additional questions that are kind of like, hey, are you going to run out of money? The reality is right now we're in a good place where we can raise money. We have options about what we want to do, and we will certainly make sure that we do not run out of money. That is not a very hard process for us to do. Bram and I joke that the two things we actively have to do is not screw it up directly and not run out of money.
Okay. I was just laughing because the not run out of money parts, it's hilariously important for most companies.
Hey, we
but,
like paychecks. Oh my
but
god.
I'm a
it's
big
actually,
fan of not running out of money.
yeah, it's something Gene's also really good at doing too.
I'm a couple hundred million in over my history so far, so
Yeah. Your track record is promising. Let's see. I had a great. Oh yes, here we go. Justin, our keeper of data and shepherd of node tracking. Are we expecting or anticipating any kind of reduction of nodes and net space with the current European Union's kind of energy state of being a bit in flux right now?
Great question. So I think there's actually two questions kind of wrapped up in this one. One of them is, does energy price affect chia farming? And actually, we've seen not much, right? Like, obviously, there's going to be some point where electricity would be too expensive to do anything with it other than like absolutely necessary things. You probably wouldn't run your dishwasher if you were paying, $10 a minute for electricity at home. But we haven't seen, as energy prices have increased, especially when the war in Ukraine kicked off and the energy crisis kind of spun out of that. There hasn't really been a large drop in nodes correlated to those timelines. Most of our large drops in nodes are Patch Tuesdays. I think that's pretty infamous now. And then in general, node count is very steady. And so while prices are high and we have seen some drop off in Europe, Europe isn't the place that's losing the most users when there is big drop off. Usually the big drop offs are in China or the United States or Russia are largest contributors of nodes in general, which kind of makes sense. And then the other question is like, how does this compare to other forms of cryptocurrency farming or mining? I would say we're far more resilient than others. And I mean, there's a literal war going on, and we haven't seen nodes decrease really significantly in either country. And I think that's a pretty good testament as well to like the stability of chia farming. And so like, yes, there probably will be a point where it's too expensive for some people to participate. If you followed the guidance we gave at the beginning of like cheap hardware or hardware you already own that could be repurposed, your ROI or your like cost to run the farm is probably less. And so less profit on top of that is probably acceptable for your operation. But again, that's a thing that like you as an individual farmer have to decide. I would say that based on the numbers, people are deciding that it's worthwhile to continue to farm chia at current energy prices.
It's not a very complicated formula. We have it all in the public TCO models. The Chia calculator ROI has all the stuff input in there. You just pop in your energy prices and the power of the disk capacity, and you can figure out if it's profitable or not. Now, I warn people, and Bram has said it a million times, this is a really competitive market. And eventually people are realizing that drives that are 9 or 10 years old, these 2 and 3 terabyte drives are not so competitive versus 20 terabyte drives and 18 terabyte drives and other things on the market. So eventually, especially in places where there's high electricity costs, will farming a 2 or 3 terabyte hard drive be profitable? Probably not.
I'll also tell you folks that I tell people that we generally have more nodes in Ukraine than most blockchains have nodes.
Oops, fan mute. Alrighty, Earle, I got kind of 2 in 1 here for you. So question we have is this. First of all, the compressed DB requires more CPU power. Will a Raspberry Pi continue to be able to handle that? And along with that, someone has asked regarding the new Raspberry Pi 02W, is that powerful enough to handle a node?
Yeah, I'll take the compression thing. I think JM touched on it a little bit, but we use Z standard to compress the blocks. And actually we picked a pretty low level of compression, and modern CPUs, especially the ARM ones, the Pis, they have no trouble running the compression that we are currently putting the DB on. It's hardly a blip at all to them to do that compression. So yeah, in fact, V2DB is already out there, and no Pi 4s have no trouble running the V2DB. In fact, you can even convert it right on a Pi 4, right? And it's perfectly fine. So yeah, there is a trade-off, but the current things we picked are very little on the Pi 4 CPU, and so that's not a problem. If we made it tweakable so that you could set your own parameters, then maybe you could get more compression, and at some point you could probably start hurting your CPU. But right now it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, and we'll probably want some community members to test that when we get that out and test syncing times on Pi. I know people in the community have been extremely helpful in testing sync times and other database stuff. So it's not like it's on the radar for the people that are writing the code, as Earle knows. It's just I've been requesting it for a long time, but they have a lot of stuff going on. So
yeah, the new Pi 02 is actually quite interesting. The CPU is probably for sure capable of running the node because it's the same CPU that's in the Pi 3, which I'm pretty sure is capable of running the node if you put a 64-bit OS on it. The problem you're going to have is memory. I think it only has 512 gig or 512 megabytes, sorry. Just 512 megabytes. And I think that's probably not enough memory to run the node. So I'm going to say no, it probably can't run the node, but it's not because of the CPU. It's probably because of the memory.
Can certainly remote harvest though.
Yeah, in fact, it's already been done with running it as a remote harvester. I think even the Pi 0W original, like the one, can actually be a remote harvester if you can put, maybe not because that's ARM v7, so maybe not, misspoke there. But yeah, it can definitely run a remote harvester, and but you're gonna have memory problems trying to run node.
Thank you. I got one for you, Paul, that I'm gonna kind of tag team you on. So the question is, do we have any upcoming new strategies we can share for improving the developer environment, and what can we expect from Chia in terms of community developers support and new areas to focus? So before I give it over to you to talk about, let me kind of give folks an update on a few things. So we have two kind of parallel branches on how we support the community developers. Paul's team has a huge set of work they're doing for products for the developer community, the actual tools and products they use. And then we have a developer relations team in place now we put together over the last few months who is taking those products and tools that the product team builds for the developers and actually supporting the community and ecosystem with those things, and then taking their feedback and stuff and kind of folding it back into the product team. We actually had hoped our new director of developer relations could be on the call this week. Unfortunately, he had a conflict today when we were scheduling all this. He wasn't able to join us, but he'll probably be on a future AMA to kind of talk to folks and say hi. They've got a lot of work going on right now, or they are looking at our existing documentation and how it's shared and how we're kind of formatting it, and then they're working on ways to sort of take what we currently have out there and just sort of rescope how we're sharing it with people, and more importantly, actually talk to people in real time and get a better understanding of what it is they are actually finding gaps in or having problems with, so that we can better make the stuff serve those needs. And then I'll let Paul talk more about the actual product side of that, like what they're actually working on.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So there's a lot of feedback we've received from the community about developing in Chia Lisp. And so some of the areas that we are actively looking to support and build solutions for are things around debugging. We currently don't have a good debugger for Chia Lisp. There's no syntax to highlight stuff as you're writing code. You don't get print statements. You don't get error messages when things fail. These are some of the issues that we know we need to improve on. and you're going to hear from us about how we're bringing those to market. Cameron Cooper is actively working on these things right now, so more to come.
Cool. JM, are there any real world practical / realistic projects that have outcome from the CDI currently?
Yeah, it's funny. People thought that, well, so one, yes, and this is a massive, massive, problem in the industry for e-waste. When we first started covering this, we're like, okay, could be tens of millions of hard drives. We talked to individual hyperscalers that are at that tens of millions of hard drives shredded per year. If you count all the drives shredded in notebooks and other, like low cost devices, it's hundreds of millions of storage devices. So no, this is not a problem the industry can solve in 6 months or a year. It's a really tough problem, but we've done a couple things in the short term. Seagate has hooked me up with their authorized resellers for recertified drives, and we're trying to get more older drives into that mix. They have these things they call white label drives, which are drives they basically have that it's new, but it's some of the platters are bad, so they kind of depopulate them and sell them for cheaper. So I've been getting those into farmers' hands. It's already like 15-20 petabytes worth. They've been tracking that for me. So Seagate does a little over 1 million drives per year. So these are some of the metrics we're going to be tracking: is how much of our net space is coming from used and underutilized storage, reused storage. As far as like the actual drives that will go through CDI, that will come a little bit later. We've made so much tremendous progress with one of the large hyperscalers, but they obviously have agreements with their end customers, and the messaging of that is a little sensitive, and so we're being respectful for when they want to do some of these broader launches and communications. But trust me, the guys we're working with are the biggest in the industry, and it's going to be awesome when everybody hears some of the impact Chia is going to have just by pulling this whole thing together. Yeah, so it's super exciting, and I'm actually presenting on this topic of sustainability and storage, media sanitization, and circular drive initiative in the open compute platform OCP work group for storage work group next week. So I'll send everybody that link. That will be recorded, and people can check out what we're doing.
Cool. Earle. This person admits this is a slightly over-specific question, but they saw some Rust code floating around our GitHub, and they're wondering if Rust is going to be used more in our development process.
Yeah, short answer is yes. Slightly longer answer is we're currently continuing to profile all the code because we're always interested in making code and making performance improvements. And as we find things in profiling that come up, we look to if implementing them in a different language is better. And Rust it's probably going to be one of two things that we would do it in. We'd either do it in C++ or Rust. And so there's actually a project that some of the engineers are working on right now to improve some of the Merkle sets in Rust. So I think you will see more Rust. What you won't see is probably any change to the core consensus code. That's going to remain Python, but we continue to find areas where we think we can improve performance, and we add them to a different language or improve the Python, either one. But yeah, you'll see more Rust.
Okay. Gene, is Chia Network in the ears of any U.S. government officials regarding their research into blockchain that was issued by the president? Besides the obvious meme campaign that went on a few weeks ago on Twitter regarding your visit to the Capitol, what would you like to share there?
Oh, are we? So, obviously I was in DC in person for 2 days. That was both White House, House and Senate meetings. And, we were really excited about the EO. The EO took what we think is a pretty good tone and position on what can happen here. And, our message of a, sustainable blockchain with real world use cases really resonates as, both our friends and the White House figure out what their kind of official blockchain policy is. So, I think you're going to see a lot of real positives there. One of the things that we didn't talk about as much is, for example, in the previous session, we were very active in New York on the Albany issues, and obviously we're there again this year. For those of you who ask about that, We've met with the sponsor. She is actually a statistician originally, if I remember correctly, but anyway, a mathematically backgrounded person. So totally understood the difference between proof of space and time, proof of work, and proof of stake. So, that bill is about opening new power plants to run proof of work, not proof of work miners generally in New York. So that's another little detail everybody needs. But, we expect that the EO is going to potentially be quite useful. And I think that, that all levels of government are excited to talk about blockchain solving real world problems. And ours is kind of the only blockchain that's out there solving real world problems, caveat cross border payments and, store of value with Bitcoin.
Okay. Paul, got another one for you. Hardware wallet support for Chia. What's any updates there?
Yeah, so we have been actively engaged with Ledger. We're in their Slack. We are aware of their engineering progress. Their latest is that they have told us they're ready to merge, but it has been a little while. I would encourage people in our community to also go in on the demand side and let Ledger know that you want Chia support. They're a demand-driven company like anybody in the ecosystem. And so if you pester them, that helps. So please let them know. On the engineering and product side, we're actively engaged.
And it's not just Ledger, by the way.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Let's see here. So I'll take this one. Before I do this, gentlemen, if you have answered a question you have tagged, please close your questions in the Q&A queue because there's a bunch still in there that we've touched on. Some questions in here about swag. We touched on this a little bit last AMA. So we've talked before about how we gave out the holiday cats, and they had two purposes. One is for a future NFT for last year, and the other was a redemption code for swag. And those things are all kind of like dovetailed together. So one question in here further down was, what's up with the holiday NFT? Well, obviously, as you know, we have NFT stuff in the works. We can't give you guys a holiday NFT until we have NFTs. So that is a self-solving problem when that time comes. Swag was another thing. When we were working in the past, we had to figure out partners to actually produce the swag. A lot of people here are like, well, can't you just go on like a website that does like on-demand printing and have t-shirts made? And it's like, we could. Here's the thing. I don't know if you guys have spoken to us much or watched many of these things, but we care about things like quality and we care about a lot about things like user experience. And so doing on-demand printing of a cheap t-shirt site where we can just like upload our logos and click a few buttons to create a storefront and let you just buy like 1,000 different things on demand that has our logo slapped on it, that's not quality merch. That's just slapping our logo on cheap stuff that's made on demand that will fall apart. We want to give you guys good quality merch that is like things you'll want to wear, that are happy to have, and that will last you a long time. So to start with that process, we first did internal merch for the team as like a team thing. And we have some folks internally who were working on that. And the first batch of them all went out to staff literally in the last few weeks. I think there's a couple employees internationally who are still waiting on theirs because international shipping is a bit of a problem these days, as some of you maybe know. But by and large, most of it's gone out and we're really happy with the results. We like the partner we're working with. We like the quality of their products. And so now phase 2 of that is those same people now going back to our partners who made those things and said, okay, you also do e-commerce vendor sites for merch for people. Let's now do phase 2 of merch for the community. So I will probably talk to them and find out what their timeline window looks roughly like, and then probably set up maybe a little community Q&A live call down the road for that topic specifically, because that'll kind of put a flag in the sand, let you guys know after this point it'll probably be viable, and it also kind of forces us to commit to a deadline. But in either case, before we've said soon TM, now that TM is slowly starting to fade away, like Marty McFly in the photo in Back to the Future, and turning into just soon. We're getting to that point. So we're much closer than we were before to merch for you guys as good, cool merch. So then next up, Gene. If we were to seek additional funding and do another round before an IPO, would we ever consider a form of crowdfunding? I already know the answer to that, so why don't you explain why the answer is what it is?
Yeah, so the technical answer is no. The actual answer is yes. And let me explain what the heck I mean by that. There are two different methods that we would most likely go public by, and that would either be to merge with a special purpose acquisition company or a SPAC, or to do an S1. In the S1 scenario, we would be able to potentially offer farmers that had farmed a block on the chain before a certain date the ability to buy at the IPO price. To the extent that we go with a SPAC, it's not as clean, but you'll be able to buy the SPAC's trading equity before that merger is complete, which would let you get in basically at the same price as the effective go public transaction occurs at. So decent odds that we'll be able to do one of those. And that will be a pretty nice way for our farmers to kind of get in at the go public price. Obviously, cannot guarantee it. There are some deal dynamics, and the banks, kind of get in the situation a little bit. But that is our hope, and we'd very much like people to be able to, effectively buy into both the future of the Chia Networks Inc. and the pre-farm themselves. So.
Okay, thank you, sir. Justin, here's a fun topic. The sandstorm, or dust storm, or whatever we're going to call it, which my understanding actually is that it tapered off about a week ago. And last I was seeing, folks were saying it hasn't come back since in the way that it was. But anyways, do we know what the point of the ongoing dust storm is? Because it's clear it no longer is intended to slow down the network. So at this point, what is the point?
So first of all, I would like to say that someone sending transactions on the blockchain doesn't have to necessarily have a point. Like the point of this blockchain, presumably, is that people will send money to each other around the world. And so the fact that this person is doing it now with automation and doing what some people feel is abuse, I don't necessarily feel it's abuse. In fact, I don't know, it's like useful load testing, right? As long as it's not hurting anybody. But to address like what they think the ethos is, I would say that it's probably a person that there was that initial duster that there was that article about who mentioned that they were doing it to prove that there were inefficiencies, which I don't think that anybody that knew anything about the code disagreed with that. So I think there's probably some load testing or creating a static amount of load on the network that's part of a goal there for anybody that would be dusting a network. And also like probably because they can, right? Like a lot of things that happen when you're available to the internet and you're globally kind of putting your name out there, the things that are going to happen to you are because someone is capable of doing them. And in an ecosystem where we aim to not set and dictate rules, and we don't want to put a thumb on the scale, I don't know that we necessarily have a say in how people use the blockchain. And so I don't know, I think a lot of people are very concerned about when things are being dusted and when it interrupts them because they have to pay fees for things. So I definitely empathize with that. But also there's like an element of this is how it's going to be eventually. And so we should, as an ecosystem, build practices and policies around the network actually being used, right? Like consider that anytime you get to send a free transaction as like a gift, because that's going to go away eventually. And so I know we've talked about this ad nauseum, and some people don't really like that answer, but that's kind of an ethos for us. So
I will actually, I'll just step in and give kind of an engineering from my view here, is that we are well aware that this can cause problems with people with wallets who have hundreds of thousands of 1 and 2 Mojo coins in them. And we have people here at Chia who are in that boat. And we know it's not good. And so all of what Justin said is 100% totally correct. And we do know it is painful for people. So we are actively trying to think of ways to fix all of that. Some of those things are longer term things, which is all around better wallet syncing, improved protocols, stuff like that, which is sort of longer term out. Some of it's probably going to come shorter term, but we are aware that it can be painful to have such wallets, and we do have plans to address all of that. Well, maybe not all of it, but we know it's a pain point, and we hope to fix it going forward.
And as another note, it looks like they've become more efficient. So like, I don't even think this is malicious. And I don't know that's even one entity, right? Because there's been different patterns, there's been different like scale. And then like, if you want to phrase it in attack, there's been like different attack patterns. Like whoever it is, if it's one person, they are changing up their game plan. But I think it's
probably just a bunch of whale farmers trying to increase fee pressure so they get more fees.
Maybe.
But no, more seriously, thank you for that. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Gene. Um, One of the reasons that we have the pre-farm is to loan XCH to companies potentially. And this person's wondering what would happen if a company took a loan from us in Chia, and then during that loan period, the XCH value increased 500%, which does happen in the crypto world quite easily sometimes, making it unpayable. Like what happens to the loan? Like how would we actually structure those loans to make them sane in market swings?
The answer is, while we're private, we can't. And so this is part of the reason why we want to be public. If you are a user of one of our loans and we are public, you can actually use our equity options to lock in any of this price movement, such that you would only have a price movement one way or the other, slightly. And additionally, this issue happens for other blockchains, but because they're illegal securities and don't care about the securities laws, they simply pre-sell forward a futures option on it. And that's how they kind of deal with it on that side. Now, what's nice is that we believe that once we're public, those kinds of structures become available to us too. But that's one of the reasons that going public isn't just about in fact, isn't it all about an exit strategy? It's about our product strategy and being able to use that pre-farm for the things we all want to use it for in a way that's fully and totally regulatory compliant.
All right.
So differently, we haven't made a lot of loans because that's what people are worried about right
now. Paul, have AMMs ever been developed in a CoinSet model, and how might the experience of using a CoinSet AMM differ from an EVM AMM?
Yeah, it's a really great topic. We generally think AMMs are a really important piece of infrastructure for the Chia ecosystem. The short answer is yes. CoinSet model AMMs have been developed. You'll see Cardano talking about this. We don't want to throw shade, so we're not going to talk about feedback on their AMM model. I can say that there is an active project developing an AMM on Chia. It is confidential, and we're collaborating with them, providing them feedback. Bram is directly involved. So that work is ongoing. But because it's not our AMM, we can't really disclose who it is at this time. But it is actively ongoing. And there are really interesting problems to solve. Some of those will be surfaced as chips, most likely that you'll see coming from us. Principally around how can you enable something like a singleton to aggregate transactions in a single block. And that is like a principal problem to solve with AMMs in a CoinSet model. Gene, you've been involved in some of these. If you want to add any color to this as well.
Yeah, there are two different ways to kind of do AMM in the UTXO model. One is like very, very mild trust of the AMM operator to basically synchronize the transactions. But what we've always considered doing is actually expanding the logic in the mempool so that the mempool can actually, a farmer can aggregate a bunch of transactions against, say, a single Oracle spend, so that you do a really long spend bundle of all of the individual transactions that rely upon that. And so we're actually kind of right now, dogfooding would overstate it, but designing and double checking that and starting to think about where we're going to enter that into the mempool so that over time the mempool has that extra wisdom in it to be able to do that. Longer term, there's gonna be a lot of interesting things about the mempool. And in some ways, this project is like, first you got to get a blockchain. We got to a blockchain. Then you got to get a core base language on top of that, and that's chialisp. And then you get to being a market set, which is offers, indexes, and AMMs. And then you get to, okay, now that you've got that, what is the interesting things that you do as a farmer to maximize the security budget, aka get the most fees? So, we're going to continue to see that kind of progression up that stack in complexity and functionality.
Okay, next up, I'll take this one. Do we plan to release any new Chia list tutorials for cats? And if so, what aspects of cats will they cover? I don't know about new specifically, but the DevRel team that I mentioned previously is right now going over all of our Chia list tutorials, including cats and other stuff, kind of with a fine-tooth comb. And they're talking to community devs who have used them and built stuff after reading them. And they're doing some kind of focus groups, trying to figure out what knowledge gaps might be in them, or what we could rewrite differently, or how we can maybe present the documents in ways. They're talking to our technical writer, Dan, who is just one of the most amazing technical writers I've ever worked with as well. And they're all kind of noodling over, what does a V2 of this documentation look like? Because documentation, like code, is a living product. The documentation that came out when we released CATS and when we released the first bits of our Chia list was fresh and new and had been made in parallel with the creation of it. And much like the code itself is evolving, and you always kind of want to look back and make sure that there's ways to improve that. So they're working really hard on trying to sort of restructure that in a way that's a bit easier to work from. That might then include maybe adding things that are missing. When that is done, as part of that, they'll probably also maybe do some examples and some other like live example type stuff. So that might kind of cover some of that as well. But they're working on that right now. So that's kind of what that's going to cover. Let's see here. Earle, everyone's favorite subject again, plot compression. As this person puts it, I've lost track of my pet peeve, plot compression. Where are we at on that? I know you touched on it a little bit earlier. They also then ask, they've tried blade bit disk, but it's still kind of unofficial state. And they want to know if we have any educated guesses or updates we can give on a possible beta release for that.
Yeah, I'll do plot compression, and then actually I'll let JM talk about blade bit disk. So plot compression, yeah. So we had this project for plot compression. It had been going on for a really long time. It's still something we're doing, and we're working on it. But right now we've transitioned some of the resources who are working on plot compression to actually work on the Time Lord ASIC project. So I think you can consider it slightly deprioritized from that perspective. So I don't think we're going to have plot compression out this year, to be honest. I think we're going to have the Time Lord ASICs project going out sooner because we think that's more important. We will definitely do plot compression, but sometimes you have to make choices and resources. And I think right now we're gonna concentrate more on the Time Lord project, and I think Gene can pick up on that. But first, on that sad note, let's go to a happier note. Let's talk about blade bit disk. So JM, why don't you go ahead?
Awesome. Yeah, well, I know we said we weren't going to have any announcements today, but we lied. We have a blade bit disk alpha that we just released, and it's going to be on GitHub. And the alpha will be a release of the binaries for all the operating systems. So we'll have binary. You don't have to compile anything or do anything like that. Just download it, and it will be command line only for the alpha. Think of the alpha as it's code complete. For now, it definitely produces valid plots. There are some known bugs with some different bucket sizes. There are some really interesting performance optimizations that we've identified in testing some of these early versions, and Harold's going to be trying to work on that for the beta for some performance optimizations. But the alpha already has very impressive performance. I tested it on my Ice Lake system this morning. So this is one of the systems that we have a lot of data on as far as blade bit in memory, but I was able to produce a plot with all disk, no DRAM caching, no any of that, no RAM disk, anything, all disk. It will produce a plot in 7 minutes. And we think we can get that down actually pretty close to the memory time, like 5 or 6 minutes with some bandwidth optimization. So I'm super impressed with the how far we've made it. On it's like kind of standard 8-core system. Right now we're seeing like 1 to 2 minute, maybe 4 minute benefit versus Mad Max. I mentioned on the high end systems, we're seeing like 2x benefit versus Mad Max. So, but yeah, we know there's a lot of system types, lots of operating systems and different corner cases we probably have not tested. So we will be putting together a formal beta program, which will include GUI support and actually full functionality as far as different bucket sizes and parameters you can mess with. So I will hopefully be releasing some documentation on the BladeBit wiki today on how to run that for different operating systems, and we'll be in the plotting channel be able to support anybody who wants to test it, the alpha. So
yeah, please go to the plotting channel, and there'll be stuff in there and post things in there, and I think Harold and JM will be able to answer a lot of questions in there. But we're really excited about it, and I think it's going to be nice for plotting. So yeah, great. Thanks, Sam.
And I'll pick up on the ASICs questions.
I was just gonna say, why don't we dovetail into that?
Yeah, so we remain right on the schedule that we originally were talking about. So we believe that we're going to have silicon in our hands in the Thanksgiving timeframe. We currently are running an FPGA version, and that was the developing issue in question that we had to move off, is to get the software adapted to the FPGA, which is going to have the same interface as the actual ASIC. The ASIC is looking like it's going to be relatively easy to cool, super easy to power. Right now, I think we're talking about delivering it in a little box that looks like a Pi 4 that'll have a USB-C or 2 on it, and so you'll use USB power and USB data to connect to the thing. It will require a little bit of a machine, so you can't have a Pi 4 be a competitive Time Lord, because you're still proving the proofs back out over on the CPUs. But the hard part is being done obviously on the ASIC. We're going to get somewhere between 75 and 200 of them. Each one of them is a full Time Lord. There are 3 VDFs on each one of the chips. We are going to be selective about who can get them, and they also may not be free, but they're going to be nominal in cost. I won't expect them to be that expensive. We certainly will have paid a lot more per than we're going to charge. We certainly are going to be, screening this for academics, for pool operators, for folks who are already in the community and have a really good reason. Obviously we're going to keep quite a few to make sure that we have good redundant backups around the world. But the whole goal here is to, have a reasonable process, and, we'll let others in too, but we're going to probably have to justify why you are one of the people who should get one of these ASICs initially. That may change on the second round of all of this, and that's something we'll be planning, next year. But the whole goal here is to get these in the right hands at first. And hopefully too, you'll see some of these start to appear on testnet at the end of the year. It's going to be kind of a wild thing to figure out how to underclock them so we can move the network over.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of touch on this one a little bit. We talked about this at the beginning of the call, but there's folks who've drifted in after the start. Just a quick reminder, we said at the top of the call, NFTs, not something we're going to talk about, answer a lot of questions on. We have stuff coming soon, no TM soon on that, and so we're not going to answer a lot of questions on that. This question is asking the NFT space, and Chia is looking exciting and could provide some initial transaction volumes. They were wondering if we're going to be doing any marketing from Chia to help boost initial interest. And I will say, yes, there's going to be a whole marketing thing around that. That's all I'm going to say, because the guys working on NFTs have stuff they want to share with you when the time is right, which is not terribly far away. So I don't want to spoil any of that thunder, but yes, we do have a marketing plan behind that. I just wanted to answer that, because the one thing I hate is when people put questions and then they see the questions there unanswered at the end of the call. I feel bad. So I wanted to just remind folks that, we're not going to answer stuff on NFTs, but stuff coming. JM. Would it be possible to add the option to search for plots in subdirectories instead of having to add each directory one by one?
Yeah, I'm just going to laugh at this. I flagged this one to answer because I poked at one of our engineers who was doing a lot of the harvester work, and Kevin knows about it. I've asked for it. I'll probably officially put it on the Trello, but I have like hundreds of mount points on one of my harvesters. So yeah, this is near and dear to my heart, of course. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We'll do something.
JM brings it up pretty regularly.
Yeah.
I mean, you have hundreds. I have 9 mount points on my box I call Greenhouse, and the 9 mount points alone are a pain for me to keep track of. I can't imagine hundreds.
Yes. So thank you guys for the reminder. We will make sure it's on the Trello by the end of the day.
Did you guys not write your own like remounting scripts and all that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I have FS tab set up, and I have a few other scripts and stuff. It's just, it's pain.
Yeah, I'm gonna post a picture of my FS tab, and Justin's just gonna cry.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Justin, the art on the wall behind you. Someone wants to know when that's gonna be. Where that be NFT'd?
Okay, so two things. One, I don't own the copyright on any of that art because I didn't make it. So I'll have to talk to the creator. She's having nap time right now. And then, I mean, probably not. I'm not really, I'm not big on digital versions of my art assets. I like the real world ones. Maybe I'll do like something real special for as a prize someday, but probably not. I'll do other NFTs. There's cooler stuff to NFT
An
than my whiteboard.
NFT of a metaverse item that people can wear of your beard, maybe.
That I'm in. Yeah.
All right, what do we got here? JM, come back to you real quick. The Akash video this week. This person asked, I didn't get a chance to listen to the whole video yet, but they did catch that farmers will be able to provide their own plotters as a service through Akash, which is correct. Is there like a really quick, like 1-2 paragraph high level summary of what the Akash thing is for folks who maybe haven't seen our stuff about it up until now?
Yeah, so
hey Jam, just before you jump in, I just want to say bye to everybody. I got to hop for a call. Thanks so much for the questions.
Thanks for hopping on the call.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so we did an announcement with Akash this week. They've updated their mainnet platform to support higher core count and higher DRAM containers. And so now the container limit is 512 gigabytes, which coincidentally is now enough to run BladeBit in memory. So now we actually fully support decentralized plotting as a service in Akash with BladeBit. And so I've actually offered up, I have a 4-node cluster that I have offered up as a provider, and you can run a BladeBit plot in my cluster. And get 5-minute plot times after all the overhead. And so really now the bottleneck is network bandwidth. We'll probably do some really fun things, like do some fun pricing stuff, or maybe I'll do a week or two where I give away 5-cent plots or 10-cent plots or something to get some demand going. But so the announcement eventually, right, people ask like, how much should a plot cost? Well, it's a decentralized plotting provider system. Anybody who wants to set up their system as a provider can say, I can plot now, and they can put up whatever price they want. So it's going to be really cool. Now, my systems happen to be very efficient. They can do very fast plot times. We're going to end up being, bottlenecked on the network bandwidth, which we kind of warned everybody about, which was one of the big bottlenecks with plotting as a service, of course, is moving tremendous amounts of data around. A 100-gigabyte file, Comcast is probably going to murder us when they find out people are downloading these. But if you have, fiber and you can download a plot in 20 minutes, and it's less expensive to buy that plot than make it yourself and buy an SSD, then we should have that in our toolkit. This will be really important in the future when we go towards, if you think 4 or 5 years down the road, when internet bandwidth is even faster at homes and lower cost, and that much bandwidth is not a big deal, being able to do like this, this true one-click farming where we can fill up drives in the background without anybody even knowing, and be able to farm underutilized space. If we don't have these decentralized plotting platforms, we'll never get the cost down and to be competitive. AWS, you can make a plot very efficiently in low cost, but then now it costs $7 to go download that because of the egress. And so this decentralized plotting platform gets around all that. And so one of the things they announced is that they actually bring on somebody on the community to help on the provider side. So they're going to help onboard some new providers. And I had a lot of learnings. That was my first Kubernetes cluster that I set up for this whole project. So that was fun for me to learn. But they're going to try to make it a lot easier than it is today. So.
Okay. Justin, I got one for you. Interesting one. You chose to answer this, which I find both surprising and not at all surprising given conversation we've had in the past. So I'll punt this one over to you. So the question that was asked is, how many women are in the Chia, the company, Chia Network? Because it seems like a very male company. And before I toss it over to you, I will say, yeah, Justin and I have a lot of conversations about the importance of tech companies not looking like a bunch of white dudes with beards. And unfortunately, the parts of our company who are very public facing and interact with you all, with the exception of Earle on this call, is a bunch of white dudes with beards. But we actually have a much more diverse in that company internally. It's just not everyone wants to be, publicly engaged. I'll let Justin kind of talk about what he wants to talk about on that.
Yeah, great. So there's 3 points I wanted to make here. One of them is that I think we have a lot of women in our, upper tier of our company. A lot of our early employees were women. Very important roles of this company are filled by women. And I think that diversity of background and experience is very important to us. But also we are a startup, and a very early startup. And so we are to the bone on the hires we're able to make and the talent we're able to bring in. And so we need to recruit the best people. There will eventually be a time when being the best at your role isn't the only thing that is required to get recruited, but right now that's where we are. And so that the makeup of the company is a product of that need, and not someone to just hire white dudes with beards, as Jay said. We are very aware that diversity of opinion and experience and whatever else is very important for a company to have, and we strive very intentionally to fill roles and champion women, because tech can be a boys' club. And I personally, I know I maybe not look like a champion of women, but I personally, as a hiring manager here, would help mentor and bring up the women that work for me. I have a couple women that are on my team, and so I think that it's kind of a consequence of two things. One of them is that the people that are extroverted and are okay with the internet knowing who they are and that they work here happen to be these guys that you see all the time, and that the women that are in the important roles in this company are kind of working behind the scenes as opposed to in more public facing roles. But not, that does not discount their contribution. I think they make maybe the most important contributions to the company of keeping everything running and making sure that, just thinking of like the stuff like Allie does as an example, right? Like, I don't think we could be a company without her. And so, I agree that it's a valid criticism. It's a valid criticism of every tech company I've ever worked for. I think that here, because of the leadership we have being kind of iconoclastic, we do not, I think, have the same at its core issues that most tech bro companies have for recruiting and hiring women, minorities, whatever other special classes of people you may look for. But I mean, absolutely, it's a fair criticism, and please stay bird dogging us about it, because it's something that I very much wish to put at the forefront of how we hire and grow as a company.
Yeah, and 2 points to underscore on that. I will say we have a lot more women, but the problem is that a lot of the women are understandably concerned about being public. One of our somewhat public females actually was already doxxed in a pretty nasty situation, and that's a very scary thing. We don't want them to feel obligated to take that responsibility on. That said, without going into it too much, there's also going to be some interesting additions to the very senior team in the near future that may directly relate to what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, I've worked at many tech companies and startups, and this is the only tech startup I've ever worked at or known people who work at that in the sub 100 employee early days, that 10% plus of our executive team, and I don't mean all employees, that's an even higher number, but 10% plus of our executive team is female. And that's actually a first for any tech company I worked at, and something I'm really happy about. That's a very high ratio for a company as small as we are and as young as we are. Gene, do stock exchanges show any interest in bridging traditional securities onto blockchains? And is there any progress or discussions on the biz dev side of that?
So there is, I don't know if I'd say stock exchanges are the ones who are going to move this, but I will say there is quite a bit of interest in broker dealers and others to move equity trading onto chain. I often tell people the SEC is not a single entity. It's kind of three entities. There's the 33 Act side, which is in the capital formation business and would be the kind of side that, for example, we deal with as we go public. There's the 40 Act side, which is the group that handles exchanges and broker dealers. And then there's enforcement, which kind of picks up the trash from either side. The 40 Act side, I think, has been overly skeptical to an unhealthy way about whether or not blockchain trading was real or they could, treat it like other major national markets. I don't think they kind of get a decision on that. And that is one of the things I spend a lot of time talking about in Capitol Hill. The definition of exchange is going to matter. One of the things we're doing with the carbon markets and trying to build a large 24/7, narrow spread, high volume, limited MEV market is to create market data that will be able to show the 40 Act side and get them more comfortable with the fact that these tools can trade equities. So equity issuers, broker dealers are all very interested in moving things over. I think the kind of normal registered equity move to chain is going to take a couple years, but we're already kind of doing the key pieces we think are going to be necessary to get us there.
Thank you. Justin, come back to you on one. Any timeline on custody improvements? The person asking the question, who rightfully made themselves anonymous, would like to not feel like they're carrying suitcases full of money. And I will preempt your answer with, if they do feel like that's a problem, I will gladly carry some of that Chia for you. Just reach out to me on Keybase in a DM. But in more serious notes, Justin, what can you tell us about custody?
Absolutely. So first, I want to say that JM and I, back when neither of us knew how to, be together on a Zoom call, little lower production value than we have now, but we put together a security how-to video, how to custody your Chia to be secure. I think that you can absolutely right now, and I'm doing it, secure your Chia in a way that isn't, doesn't feel like you're carrying $10,000 around in your pocket. Now, certainly that doesn't give you the ability to like spend offline and things like that. Certainly there are things in the ecosystem that could be available more simply to end users, right? And we're absolutely working on those features. But on the subject of like custody and how, signatures and things like that are going to go, we are working on that improvement that we promised. The kind of on-chain custody features that we've kind of discussed since the beginning are in the works. We're not going to discuss when we're actually going to enable them for our own personal holdings as a company, as a security concern. But after the fact, once we're live with it, we will absolutely share with you how we did it, and you can copy how we're going to do it because we're an open source company and always have been. I will say that that's one of the things that I'm working on. It's one of my top priorities, along with the ASIC stuff we've been discussing. And so I can say for sure that that's moving along at a rapid clip, and it will be sooner than later. There's probably no TM on that soon either. It's one of the top 3 projects that I'm personally working on right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is such an important topic. It's been a while since we talked about just general security practices for wallets and how to put, so Justin and I, we should probably just do that again, just do a Q&A, because that's so helpful. This space is obviously a lot of stuff going on, and people need a reminder for general security practices.
Gene, another fun SEC/IPO type question. The question is there a contingency if the SEC process fails for an IPO, and we would just continue as a private company if we didn't go public?
Yeah, look, there's 2 different issues here, right? There's getting public because of market conditions, and then there's SEC final approval to go effective. These are 2 kind of different issues, but in either case, we're going to make sure that we have enough capital to ride out a longer period with the SEC, because I do think we're going to be exciting in a good way, and that often means that they spend extra time looking at it. I'm okay with that, and we expect that to go well, but I want to make sure that we've budgeted for it. But yeah, look, the ultimate backup is the private equity markets are pretty open to us. It's relatively easy for us to raise at an up round from our previous round's valuation if we needed to. I think, the way I'd put it is that we'd potentially like to combine these 2 things into one. If something makes that not happen, then we just take some additional capital and come back as, either the market gets better or, as the market gets better. Though I will say, our feedback is that we may be a unique and interesting enough opportunity to be able to get through a nasty market.
Thank you. Another one for you, Gene. Do we have an official response to H-Pool's stance that they will not allow zero-fee transactions in the blocks on their node? Do we think that's a security issue or an otherwise other issue with the nature of the chain, or just do we regard that as a one-off oddity and don't care?
I'd say we don't care. And in fact, I have a little sympathy for what H-Pool is doing. They've been targeted by some of the dust stormers, and so I feel like they can completely understandably wish to not be a part of their own pain. It is a network. Farmers get to make decisions about what they include and exclude by the fee market. And, that is a completely rational economic call by H-Pool to say, hey, you got to pay min fee to get in our blocks. Ultimately, that's where this network is going. And, we're going to be talking a lot more about how, the security budget and the fee budget are really critical over the long term. And they actually kind of drive, the right decisions and the right things to build a highly scalable blockchain that's secure and global.
And Earle, I've left you alone long enough, I think. On Reddit, there was an issue raised about 134 and large farms. Do we have any information on that issue? And is it okay for large farmers to move over to 134? Should they be waiting? I know we've had a couple different discussions on both GitHub issues and Reddit about
I'll kind of
large
fold it in,
general.
although I don't know what Justin answered about the 135 question. So, but I'll roll it in. So we're internally testing an update 135. We expect it to be released very soon. And so the primary issue is the GUI didn't work very well. My understanding and all the testing that I've understood is that your farm was operational in that you were farming, you were searching your plots, you were finding, making blocks, all that kind of good stuff. But if you went to the tabs in the GUI, it didn't work out. And we have fixed that, we believe. As I said, we're internally testing it. It was actually one of the primary, if not the number one thing we were trying to fix in 135, along with Python 3.10 support. So we do expect that we will have a fix for that fairly shortly, and actually it's a pretty nice fix. We think anyone with a largish farm, the GUI should work quite a lot better with the 1.3.5 version. Hopefully, as I said, we're still internally testing it, but so far it looks good. There's also a couple other really nice fixes in 1.3.5, so I think it'll be a good release for people in general. And so far, I think it looks pretty good.
Thank you. We have about 15 minutes left, 10, 15 minutes left. This is kind of that warning to folks. If there's questions in here that you guys specifically want to make sure we answer before we go, just speak up and make sure we get that question to you in case I don't get through the list in time. With that in mind, Gene, on competition, any thoughts on the Lightning Network's Taro project and how it compares to XCH and Chiast and Cats?
Yeah, no, look, Taro's interesting. Anything Olalu does is always exciting. The only issue is that it has a lot of limitations that Omni Protocol had already. So to be able to kind of do, Chia asset token equivalents, you're still going to have to run a node, and that gets to be a bit of a mess. So it's kind of a limited capability compared to what a Chia asset token can do. So, we think the CATS standard is a superior way to do it, and then, we just kind of run CATS directly over our version of Lightning once that becomes a need from a fee pressure perspective.
And I was muted. Thank you, Zoom, for the pop-up saying, hey, you're muted.
Yeah.
There was one question that someone had asked that Paul had tagged. He wanted to answer it, but unfortunately he had to go. But I think this is something that maybe Earle and Gene can both touch on a little bit. There's actually two questions that touch on the same subject. They were wanting to know, two different people were asking questions, wanting to know, one, their understanding of how the chain works roughly is that when you do a transaction, it's going to take a coin that has a value as close to or slightly above what you want. And it's kind of arbitrary which one it chooses, not arbitrary, but in that we don't have any control over that. Is there any thoughts about giving us the ability to control which coin is used for a spend? And then the other question someone asked is, are there any potential changes to the client under consideration that would allow us to more easily consolidate coins, or at least view individual coins so people have a better understanding of what kind of change they have got floating around?
Yeah, I'll take the first. I'll take both of them. Maybe Gene can pipe in. So the current coin selection model is biggest coin, and that's it. It takes your biggest coin that matches and uses it. And there is an update which I think was coming soon, not in 1.3.5, but maybe in a release following that, where we're going to have a coin algorithm that chooses coins much more in the way Bitcoin does. I forget the name of the algorithm, Gene.
Well, it's actually whatever Bitcoin's using. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's whatever Bitcoin's using. So it runs through this whole selection of, it tries to find the coin that it matches exactly, and then it tries to find, if you don't have an exactly matching coin, it tries to find all the smaller coins that happen to exactly match, and it does that, and then it goes into like a bag selection where it randomly selects from a list of your smaller coins and tries to match them and all that kind of stuff. So, but that is also not letting you manually pick them. I think we will absolutely eventually get to a case where you can have an advanced mode. I kind of see it like when you're on your Fidelity website and you want to sell by lot, and they bring up this little thing and you can select them. I think we'll definitely have that. It's not anytime soon though, because it's not really on the roadmap right now. I think we'll eventually get there. I think the first thing we're going to do is have a better selection model. I think we go through there's a lot of discussion with Seth and Paul and UX on coin selection, because it's something we realize some people really, really want, but most people don't ever want to see. So it is tricky. It is complicated how to do it best. I think we will improve, but the first thing that's going to come is a more sophisticated selection model, so it doesn't always pick the biggest coin, which basically it should basically pick coins much closer to what you're trying to do if you have them, so that you have less coins locked up in your offers and your other things like that. So that's going to come first.
Yeah, I mean, just the only thing I'd underline is we're trying to make it work for 80 or 90% of you to not ever have to look at your coins. And, the Bitcoin model has done a good job of kind of, field testing that. It's actually built on the history of Bitcoin spending, actually. And that, but I think we're absolutely going to support the advanced button later that lets you go, no, I want to grab that coin and spend it this way. So
Yeah, and I think there's also stuff we're going to probably do, like when you make an offer, we might tell you, like, give you better upfront about how many coins it's going to take. Like, so if you make an offer for 2 Chia, or make an offer for something and it needs more coins than you might think, we should probably tell you. And that's just some of the UX stuff we just didn't get in some of the earlier versions, which will probably come. So I think the situation will improve.
Thank you. I got a couple questions that all kind of like weave together a bit, so I'm gonna kind of wrap them all into one big question and let Justin and Gene kind of tag team some of them. So some of these questions are countries with a high proportion of unbanked citizens have a huge opportunity for Chia. Do we have any plans to get these countries using XCH before they get comfortable maybe using another coin or technology? Along with that, have we thought anything at all about countries or places where either ETH and Bitcoin are not able to be used, or may soon, due to regulation changes, not be able to use, where Chia could still be able to use, and what we're doing to kind of get a foothold there? And then lastly, there was also the question of what about Africa specifically? What can we say about any knowledge we have on data on Chia adoption in that region?
So can we work backwards? I'll take the first part, and then Gene, I'll interject where Gene is off on the other ones. So first of all, if you look, like Gene said about Ukraine, like if you look at Africa, the Indian subcontinent, the Pacific island, to places traditionally that like high tier compute doesn't have strong penetration, there are massive adoption of Chia. South America, we had like the Falkland Islands, like ridiculous places that for there to be active Chia nodes and participating farmers, at least I think this early in the adoption cycle, we have lots of adoption. We have more adoption in Africa and the Middle East than Bitcoin has total nodes. And so in my opinion, like we're already there in these places. And it's been amazing to see that we put this idea out there of this coin that could run on low power nodes, this coin that could, you could participate without having, 10, 30, 80s or a, ASIC farm. And I think we're absolutely the proof is in the pudding there that is the people that are participating in this blockchain. And so that's, I mean, one of the coolest things for me is how many Bitcoin nodes you think are in the Southern Hemisphere, because there are 30, 40,000 Chia nodes, which is a lot.
yeah, and look, we're actively working with both the Atlantic Council and the Wilson Center to go into the top, first of all. So, I was on a panel with the Chief Finance Minister of Colombia last 2 weeks ago, and those are ongoing conversations. The World Bank's vetting of our technology and rollout to the 170 nations of the Paris Agreement mean that this becomes very easy for the governments to be comfortable that what we say we do, we actually do. One of the things we're going to be putting more focus on, however, is that a lot of this is about remittances. And we believe that ultimately Chia is a much better technology to do remittances in because of all the custody and control stuff that we're about to bring to bear. Now, that stuff's not out yet. It's going to be used first, dog fooding in our own pre-farm, but it's really powerful on-chain enforced ease of use. I mean, you wouldn't think about backup and security as being easier, but what we're going to be rolling out is going to be a whole heck of a lot easier if you lose your hardware wallet, or if you think somebody's stolen your backup. It's going to be a not critical problem that you can recover from. So after kind of DIDs as big rocks and the next kind of things we're doing after the NFT stuff, this custody and control items being part of the end user wallet is going to be key. And so we think that's when we're really going to kind of roll out at the grassroots. But I'll also say, like in Africa particularly, we are looking at specific partners to to enter into kind of the Paxful and local Bitcoins kind of models to make sure that people have really good offline on ramps around the world.
Thank you. Another one for you, Gene. Going back a bit to the other topic about the ASIC Time Lords. Do we have any ballpark figures yet on what the performance of that might look like compared to generally available computer hardware currently today people could be running?
So yes, currently the fastest Time Lords are running at about 225,000 IPS. Correct, Justin?
256-ish.
The state of the art has moved on me.
Yeah.
So basically the ASICs are looking like 2.5 to 4.5 times faster than that. Final number is not really available yet, but know that it's a significant increase. Jam, does that kind of gel with where you were thinking about it?
Yeah, and somebody asked another question about like future lithography. Is it going to be like Bitcoin, where every time they get to a new litho, it just invalidates, makes all the rest of them so inefficient that they can't run? And it's we had an interesting conversation about this with Bram and Gene company the other day. It's just the Time Lord is a little tricky to wrap your head around, because you don't need, it's not like the power consumption in Bitcoin where there's lots of people competing. There might be hundreds of ASICs for the Time Lords, and each one, if each one is like 5 to 10 watts or something, that's going to be so insignificant for the power consumption. But also with the algorithms that are in the VDF, it's not like there's going to be some magical 5 or 10x improvement, even with like the best in class lithography in a couple of years. So there may be small incremental improvements. And so we don't anticipate that there to be like a Rev 2 that's twice as good as the Rev 1, a year or two after. Whenever we do that next Rev, it would be like very incremental.
Yeah, and 2 points to that. First of all, we're on a much smaller process than I thought we would be, so we're kind of excited about that. We're closer to the state of the art. And Bram designed this to be up against the asymptote of single core performance. And so what you're hearing is us saying that we will continue to increase the we'll do this cycle probably one more time after this, but not in a super rush, because as long as we're close to the asymptotic piece, there's no real advantage you could possibly get by spending the couple hundred million more you'd have to do to get like 10% faster. Those returns start to get pretty darn ugly. And even right now, you're up against us if you're trying to beat us to market on this thing, and you're gonna have to spend probably 3x what we're currently spending to try to beat us at the current space. So but know that it is intentionally designed that Chia Networking is kind of here to keep repeating this process until either we get the CPU guys to compete on it for themselves, or we get to a place where every 3 years we do an upgrade that keeps up with the lithography. But even that's slowing down. The whole goal here is to get to a number that really can't go faster.
Yeah, the way Bram puts it, I think he said he spent most of 2020 how to think about having just the Time Lord grinding on away and not everything else, and basically how to do this in a way that's not going to get disrupted and break the entire thing, because it's just the proof of time is such an integral part. Obviously, proof of space and time, it can't be either consuming egregious amounts of energy or having people having an unfair advantage by having a faster Time Lord, which also is much more complicated than what I just said.
Did you want to touch on like the potential like change in speed by this like Time Lord that we may be putting online eventually?
You mean the one day that goes by in 8 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're actually talking about how to underclock it slowly in.
Oh, smart. Something I want to add to, most folks have been around from AMAs and have heard this question come up pretty much once an AMA about Time Lords, and the folks asking the questions understand them, but there's always people in there who just might be their first one, don't understand what we're talking about. I do want to clarify for those who are new to this subject. When we talk about an ASIC Time Lord, it's literally just a Time Lord. There's not going to be ASICs out there replacing your day-to-day hardware for your farming and your harvesting. We're just talking about a Time Lord, of which only one's in control of the chain at any given point, where it isn't some like backdooring into proof of work that we're like doing with ASICs. No, this is just about the Time Lord. And if you don't understand what a Time Lord does, I highly suggest you read up a bit more on it, because it's an integral part of how the chain works.
Well, there is an ASIC coming for your hard drives, and it's called SSD.
Speaking of networks and chains, Gene, folks have been getting more and more into testnet 10 lately, and some have noticed that the net space jumped dramatically by a factor of 10, up to 800 terabytes recently. You got any insight on what happened there? The answer is obviously more people began using testnet 10, but
well, a specific whale came on in that particular window and was talking about that fact. So you've got a much larger amount of space there. We try to keep a little bit of space, and I think we're actually going to be expanding how much space we can to keep on TN10, just to try to keep it from bouncing around too much. But look, it's a test net. Things are going to be different and weird, and we apologize, but that's kind of what test nets do.
Yeah, I have a dev box myself that is on testnet 10 that bounces between providing 5 terabytes and none on a given week. And so that, when the testnet's as small as it was, that 5 terabytes made a difference.
So as a note for that, if you have need to run your own little testnet, you can do a testnet on a single box. If you do start farmer, start Time Lord, like start former Time Lord as the two arguments after start, that will bring up a completely self-contained network that will start creating blocks as long as you have plots that are not that are OG plots. And actually, you might even do it with testnet plots. You just can't, or with pool plots. You just can't claim your pool rewards. Maybe
That's right. Yeah, you can use pool plots, but you only get your 1/8.
Yeah,
so I mean, there are
testnet
patterns
can sometimes vary wildly because you can dual farm the plots. So like if you just switched, if you had like a reasonably sized farm and just said, oh, I'm going to do some testnet testing today, boom, all those plots are all of a sudden on testnet. So yeah, so it can vary pretty widely.
So we're pretty much at time. Before I say that, is there any question that we haven't gotten to that one of you guys just absolutely feels like your life will be incomplete if you don't answer it?
Win Roadster.
Alrighty. So for folks whose questions we didn't get to, our apologies. If you go into, I'll say this, if you asked a question that we didn't get to and is still in the queue, I cannot guarantee it will get an answer, but if you post it in the Reddit thread that will feel posted to announce the AMA, if you post it in there, I can promise that we will attempt to answer it for you if we didn't get to it on this. That's not an open invite for people just to ask AMAs, turn it an AMA thread. But if it was a question that was asked in the queue, then I've seen them, I know what they are, then I'll go try to post an answer there. But I'm not going to turn that into a free-for-all AMA, so don't go crazy. With that said, thank you everybody for joining us today. I think this is one of I really liked this cosmopolitan group that we had this time. I think we covered one of the more interesting, wide-ranging sets of questions this time. This is one of the more, I think, informative, fun, kind of hitting all the notes kind of AMAs we've done in a while. I think it was a really good one. Apologies for the folks watching on YouTube. Had some technical issues in the beginning. I apologize about that. If you stuck through the whole YouTube video, you noticed it got fine later on. So thank you for hanging in there. This is the first time we did the new format, and so I think the audio will be great. Unfortunately, we sacrificed some video problems at the beginning, but next time video and audio will finally be good. Thanks everybody for coming, and thank you gentlemen for all taking part in all of this today on your Friday morning.
Have a great weekend around the world, folks.
Thanks. As always, we'll be in the channels.
Yep. See you online.
See y'all on Keybase.